Stress is usually blamed on workload, pressure, or lack of rest. Stoicism identifies a deeper problem: uninterrupted psychological exposure. The modern individual exists inside constant stimulation. Notifications, opinions, comparisons, uncertainty, and endless information compete for attention continuously. Over time, the mind loses the ability to separate what matters from what merely demands reaction. This creates a dangerous condition. People become mentally available to everything as attention remains permanently open. Emotional reactions become automatic rather than deliberate. The individual stops choosing responses consciously and begins reacting impulsively. Stoic philosophy described this long before digital culture existed. For Epictetus, emotional instability was not weakness. It was the result of allowing external events unrestricted access to internal judgment. Modern society increases comfort while weakening emotional resilience. The environment constantly occupies attention, and once attention becomes externally controlled, emotional life follows the same pattern. Stress then becomes more than pressure. It becomes cognitive disorder. Chapter 2: The misunderstanding of stress. Most people believe stress is caused entirely by external circumstances. Stoicism challenges this assumption. According to Stoic analysis, events themselves are psychologically neutral until the mind assigns interpretation to them. This does not mean pain is imaginary. It means emotional suffering is amplified through judgment, anticipation, and internal narrative. A delay becomes rejection, uncertainty becomes catastrophe, temporary discomfort becomes identity. The event remains limited, but interpretation expands it. Modern culture rarely questions this process. Immediate emotional reaction is often treated as authenticity, while emotional restraint appears unnatural. Stoicism views uncontrolled interpretation as psychological vulnerability. Because once perception becomes distorted, reality itself begins feeling unstable. Many individuals suffer not only from reality, but from imagined consequences created by their own mental projections. Epictetus argued that people are disturbed less by events than by their opinions about events. The deeper problem is not only external instability. It is internal instability that goes unexamined. Chapter 3: Attention as psychological capture. Modern anxiety is fueled not only by difficulty, but by interruption. The modern environment is built around capturing attention. Every system competes for emotional focus, because attention eventually shapes behavior. Stoicism treats attention as the foundation of self-governance. What controls attention gradually controls emotional direction. Each distraction appears harmless in isolation. A notification, a headline, a comparison, but psychologically, every interruption pushes the mind into reaction mode. Over time, continuous reaction weakens reflective judgment. The individual stops operating through principles and begins operating through stimulation. This is the deeper danger of distraction. The problem is not reduced focus alone. It is reduced internal authority. Social psychology shows that emotional patterns spread socially through exposure and repetition. Digital systems intensify this continuously. Fear spreads rapidly. Outrage spreads rapidly. Comparison spreads rapidly. A person who cannot govern attention eventually becomes governed by external systems instead. Stress then becomes constant psychological invasion. Chapter for Stoicism. As internal authority. Stoicism is not emotional suppression. It is a system of internal governance. Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus viewed emotional chaos as a failure of internal authority, not because emotions were dangerous, but because unexamined reactions allowed external conditions to dominate psychological stability. The central Stoic principle is simple: separate what can be controlled from what cannot. Most individuals reverse this completely. They obsess over uncertainty, public opinion, and future outcomes while neglecting self-regulation. Stoicism redirects attention inward, not toward emotion itself, but toward judgment and response. Discipline becomes cognitive protection. The purpose is not emotional numbness. It is clarity before reaction occurs. This creates psychological sovereignty, because a person unable to regulate emotional reaction remains vulnerable to manipulation through fear, praise, or outrage. Stoicism seeks stability before engagement with the external world. The objective is internal coherence despite external disorder. Chapter 5 Modern Identity versus Stoic Discipline. Modern identity increasingly depends on visibility and external validation. Attention becomes psychological currency. Reaction becomes proof of significance. Social media intensifies this process constantly. People begin constructing identity through audience perception rather than internal consistency. Stoicism directly opposes this structure. It treats emotional control as strength and excessive self-display as vulnerability. Digital culture rewards exposure, reaction generates engagement. Emotional intensity generates visibility. As a result, emotion gradually becomes performance. Stoicism interrupts this cycle by reducing dependency on external affirmation. But this feels uncomfortable because many modern identities rely on continuous validation to remain stable. The Stoics viewed this dependence as dangerous. Because once emotional stability depends on approval, manipulation becomes easy. Praise controls behavior. Criticism controls behavior. Visibility controls behavior. The Stoic individual becomes harder to destabilize because emotional reactions are no longer externally managed. Internal judgment replaces collective emotional momentum. Chapter 6. Discipline against chaos. Modern culture encourages immediacy. Immediate stimulation, immediate reaction, immediate emotional release. Stoicism deliberately slows this process. Discipline, in Stoic psychology, is not punishment. It is resistance against psychological disorder. Without discipline, emotional states become environmental. Mood shifts according to interruption, uncertainty, and social pressure. The Stoics emphasize the pause between stimulus and response. That pause restores conscious choice. Inside it, reaction becomes observable rather than automatic. Modern behavioral psychology recognizes similar mechanisms in emotional regulation and impulse control. An impulsive mind becomes predictable, and predictable emotional patterns are easy to manipulate. The disciplined mind still experiences emotion. The difference is structural. Emotion no longer immediately controls behavior. This is why Stoic discipline creates stability in chaotic environments. Not through emotional suppression, but through self-command. Chapter 7. The structural consequence of modern chase. Permanent stimulation reshapes society itself. Attention spans shorten. Reaction speed increases. Reflection becomes inefficient compared to emotional immediacy. Outrage cycles intensify. Fear narratives spread faster. Social polarization accelerates. Social psychology describes this through emotional contagion and group amplification. People unconsciously absorb emotional intensity from surrounding environments. Digital systems magnify this constantly. One reaction triggers another. One fear reinforces another. The result is a society operating increasingly through emotional acceleration rather than reflective judgment. Stoicism resists this structure completely. It challenges the assumption that constant engagement equals awareness. In many cases, overstimulation reduces perception instead of improving it. An undisciplined attention system becomes vulnerable to manipulation. Fear becomes profitable. Outrage becomes profitable. Chaos becomes profitable. Stoicism functions as resistance against behavioral acceleration itself, a refusal to surrender internal order to systems designed around perpetual reaction. Chapter 8 Final philosophical reflection. Stoicism does not promise peace through comfort. It assumes external disorder is inevitable. The Stoic question is not whether chaos exists. It is whether the mind possesses enough internal structure to encounter chaos without becoming controlled by it. This is the deeper meaning of Stoic discipline. Psychological independence. The ability to experience pressure without losing internal coherence. For the Stoics, freedom was cognitive before it was social. A person controlled by fear, validation, outrage, or impulse was never fully autonomous. Modern environments intensify these pressures continuously. Attention is captured, emotion is provoked, reaction is accelerated. Under these conditions, internal order becomes increasingly rare and increasingly powerful. The Stoic mindset does not reject the modern world. It rejects psychological captivity within it. In an age defined by reaction, the ability to remain internally governed becomes a form of resistance.